Early morning, after a troubled night, and Heathsby set off across the green towards the church. A few blackbirds were heard chirping in the bushes. A soft breeze rustled through the trees. On the road and pathways, not a single footstep stirred. He noticed no windows were yet lit in any of the houses, whose inhabitants, he assumed, were all asleep, some of them no doubt drugged by the murky fug of drunkenness. When they awoke with pounding heads, he told himself, they will only have themselves to blame. Heathsby was expecting to have to pass the church and knock on the vicarage door, so was pleasantly surprised at signs of life in the churchyard itself. As he neared, it was clear that the man busy hoeing by a cluster of graves was not the reverend, but the sexton, a hardy man in a linen cloth jacket and breeches. "Morning, Cedric," Heathsby breezily began, impressed at the sexton's diligence. "Nothing like an early start, eh?" You can say that again." Cedric dug his hoe into the ground with a snarl. "I've been at it since 6. Me bloody back's giving me jip, and now it's started to rain." Heathsby felt the tricklings of rain slipping down his neck, but tried to jolly the gravedigger out of his foul mood. "Aye, but at least you're putting in a shift, that's what counts. Is it, bugger?" blurted Cedric, stabbing the hoe down and resting against its handle. "It's brass what counts, pal, that's why I'm doing this lark. Do you think I'll lug this great thing across this graveyard in cold and wet for the ruddy fun of it? It's me job, mate, and that's all there is to it. But at least it's an honest... Besides, I need every bean I can get," continued Cedric, more now as if he were talking to himself, "if I'm to keep myself in gin." Heathsby felt a dark feeling wash over him, no less crushing for its familiarity. "Gin? Of course. How else do you fancy I'd stand it out here doing this sort of work?" And as if to prove it, Cedric slid a jar of gin from his pocket and took a greedy slurp before continuing. "You as well." Heathsby hung his head, defeated. "The old village seems to be at it." "Maybe so," nodded Cedric with another gulp. "Well, it's what folk do now, ain't it? Aye, we all go in for drinking now." "Not all of us," cut in Heathsby, but the sexton did not hear, being too ensconced in his renewed gin-fuelled labours. Off he went down the rows of gravestones, hacking up the grass with his hoe. Hardly a shred of self-respect. No pride in his work, just the rough plodding of the drunk. "He's a disgrace to this place," thought Heathsby, as he looked up at the old noble tower of the medieval church. Carved into its pillars were the faces of benevolent angels, a merciful Mary, Mother of God, and the pained and holy figure of Christ himself, gazing from the cross with compassionate eyes. "Have mercy upon 'em, O Lord," urged Heathsby in all but a whisper, "for they know not what they do." Slowly, with a heavy heart, he entered the church. Yes, I see." Reverend Rooker's eyes rested calmly on his visitor as he nodded understandingly and spoke in quiet, non-judgmental tones. "The rate of drunkenness is indeed increasing steadily, and from what we hear, our little village is in no way peculiar. Right across England, as we sit here today, vast numbers are taking comfort in the charms of gin, a trend showing no signs of imminent abatement." They sat on a pew towards the chancel, Heathsby hanging on the cleric's every word. At last he had found somebody sympathetic to his plight, somebody whose senses were untainted by the spell of drink, and who shared his own distaste at the growing menace of its use. "And I'm sorry to say, Father, your own lot are at it too, I've just copped one of your lads, out there in that graveyard, knocking it back. Not young Cedric. I'm afraid so. He were fair knocking it back. Ah, the young are easily led, Mr. Heatsby. The churchman rose and pronounced, as if settled on the matter, I shall pray for his soul. But is that it? Heatsby followed him down the nave, impatient. It's terrible, Reverend, all this drinking. It's getting worse. Yes, the Reverend nodded, with a note of resignation. It's quite true. There are many heavy drinkers in this neck of the woods, Heatsby. And, as I say, from what I hear, the trend is on the increase throughout much of the land. It is a sorry state of affairs, and one which warrants much consideration. I shall certainly encourage the congregation to bear this problem in mind in their nightly prayers. What good's that going to do? Demanded Heatsby, pursuing his quarry to the altar, where the flustered cleric tried to focus on rearranging the cloths and icons. We need actions, not words. Well, perhaps, Mr. Heatsby, if you should care to show your face at a service once in a while, you may be better placed to make some practical suggestion, shot back Rooker, in a tone he instantly regretted. Nor could either man really see how the miller's attendance might enable him to devise ideas on solving the problem. They each stood awkwardly for some moments before the Reverend broke the silence. Mr. Heatsby, I do apologize. Please forgive my outburst. And I am sure, given time, our community shall find the forbearance and will to overcome our current troubles by placing our faith in the Lord and embodying his good works, by the power of prayer and attending to his words, through the strength and power of combined belief, we will overcome this evil and recover our collective senses. Have faith, my good man, that together with the love of Christ in our hearts, we shall vanquish these vile liquids. He placed a hand on Heatsby's shoulder, an avuncular kindness beaming from his bright blue eyes. The miller shuffled uncomfortably. Aye, well, that's as maybe. I'm sure you're right, Father, and I hope you are. But if you ask me, summat needs to be done. Not tomorrow, not in good time, but here and now. Any road will not solve out be standing here gabbing. So I'll bid you good day. As the miller drifted down the aisle, through the door and into the overcast morning, Rooker stood watching him and shook his head in sympathy. May God's love go with you, my son, he announced sadly, words echoing through the cold stone building like the sighs of spirits lamenting the state of God's fallen kingdom. And then the melancholy Reverend walked slowly to the vestry, feeling beneath a discarded altar cloth gathering dust beside a cabinet of Bibles, to retrieve a small glass bottle half full of dark brown liquid. Pulling down a glass from an adjoining shelf, Rooker poured himself a hearty measure of the alcohol and sat back on a mound of cassocks piled up, resting and reflecting ruefully on the many sorrows of a country slowly destroying itself through the demon drink. But even as he shook his worried head, the minister could not keep from breaking into a smile as he felt warmed right through by the reassuring drink, and as he knocked back another mouthful, he began to forget his troubles and lapse into the tranquillity of one whose senses are consumed by drink.